The stars outside were cold and endless. The human pilot sat alone in the cockpit, his ship slowly drifting through the black sea of space. The engines were silent. The emergency lights blinked red. Every sound inside felt louder than it should have been: the faint hiss of leaking air, the low crackle of broken circuits, and his own uneven breathing. His name was Daniel, but right now even his name didn't matter. Survival was the only thing left. The ship had been ambushed 3 hours ago by raiders, and they had torn through his defenses in minutes. Somehow he had managed to escape the attack, but escape did not mean safety. His oxygen tanks were almost empty. His food supplies had been destroyed. The ship's systems were collapsing one by one. Daniel looked at the control panel, but half of it was dead. Sparks hissed from exposed wires, glowing briefly in the dark. He pressed a hand against the glass window and saw nothing but space. No planet, no station, no rescue signal. Only emptiness. His throat was dry. His voice was cracked when he muttered, "This is how it ends, isn't it?" He leaned back in the chair, his body heavy with exhaustion. He thought of Earth, his small home, the rivers, the trees, the smell of rain. He thought of people he once loved but lost to war. He thought of how strange it was that a man could survive battles, travel light years across the stars, and yet die here, not with a bang, but with silence. Then dash something. A faint sound touched his ears. Not inside the ship, but outside. At first he thought it was only his mind playing tricks on him. A man alone in silence sometimes hears things that are not there. But this was real. It was a soft pulse, repeating every few seconds. A weak signal. Daniel sat up sharply. His eyes widened. He checked the sensor screen, tapping it with shaking fingers. The screen flickered, broken, but there it was, an unknown signal, close, very close. Impossible. He whispered. The signal was tiny, almost like a whisper in the storm. It came from a small pod drifting not far from his ship. The pod's shape was strange, not human design, but alien. Its hull was cracked, panels broken, faint lights barely holding. Whoever was inside had no chance of survival. Daniel hesitated. His own ship was dying. He had no time, no energy to waste. But something inside him refused to ignore that signal. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was simply the human refusal to let another life end in silence. He activated the docking clamp, pulling the pod slowly toward his ship. Metal scraped as the pod connected. The airlock hissed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the hatch opened, releasing a wave of cold, thin air into his ship. And there she was. She was small, no more than 4 feet tall, her frame delicate but strong in a strange way. Her skin was pale silver, faintly glowing under the red emergency lights. Her eyes were large, bright like twin moons, and filled with something Daniel had not seen in a long time: determination. She wore a torn suit that barely protected her, and her arms were covered in scratches and tiny burns. She was breathing fast, holding a broken tool in her hands like it was her only weapon. For a long moment, the two of them stared at each other. Silence stretched between human and alien. Then, without a word, she pushed past him. She dropped to her knees near the open panel of wires, her small fingers moving fast, searching, repairing, fixing. Sparks lit the air as she reconnected circuits. With skillful precision, Daniel froze. He had expected fear. He had expected hostility. Instead, this strange little alien was saving his ship. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice rough. She didn't answer. Or maybe she couldn't. Her language might have been different, or maybe she was too focused to speak. Her eyes narrowed as she crawled deeper into the ship's guts, slipping into vents and tunnels that were far too small for a human. Her hands moved like she had done this all her life. Minutes passed. Systems began to flicker back online. The lights grew brighter. The engines gave a low hum, almost alive again. Daniel's chest rose with a strange mix of relief and confusion. Who was she? Why help him? But then he noticed something else. Her movements slowed. Her hands trembled. Her breaths came shorter. She was weak, too weak. She was saving him while her own body was collapsing. Daniel rushed forward, catching her as she stumbled out of the vent. She looked up at him, her eyes tired but shining. For the first time she spoke. Her voice was soft, broken, but clear enough. Not let ship die. Daniel stared at her, his heart pounding. She had saved his ship. And maybe, just maybe, she had saved him too. But before he could answer, alarms screamed through the cockpit. New red lights flashed. On the scanner, shapes appeared. Raider ships. The same ones that had chased him. They had found him again. Daniel looked at the girl in his arms. She was too weak to stand, but her eyes burned with fire. The ship was alive. Again, but the real fight was only beginning. Asterisk, the alarm screamed like a dying animal. Red lights spun across the cockpit, painting Daniel's face in blood-colored flashes. The raiders were back, closing in fast. Daniel tightened his grip on the controls, but the systems were unstable. The ship shook with every adjustment, like a beast on its last breath. Beside him, the small alien girl still knelt on the floor, her body trembling from exhaustion. Yet her bright silver eyes never left the tangled mess of wires sparking inside the wall. Stay down. Daniel shouted, his hands flying across the panel. They'll tear us apart. But she ignored him. Her tiny fingers slipped deep into the nest of broken circuits. Sparks burst against her skin, leaving faint burns, but she didn't flinch. She moved with speed and purpose, pulling wires, twisting them together, forcing energy into dead systems. Daniel cursed it under his breath. She wasn't afraid of pain. She wasn't afraid of death. She only wanted to keep the ship alive. The raiders fired their first volley. The ship rocked hard, throwing Daniel forward against the controls. A panel overhead burst open, dropping a shower of sparks. The girl fell sideways but pulled herself up again, crawling deeper into the narrow maintenance vent where Daniel couldn't reach. Hey, he called after her. You'll get killed in there. No answer. Only the sound of her tools scraping. Metal, the faint buzz of wires being forced into place. The enemy ships grew larger on the scanner. Too close now. Daniel's shields flickered once barely a shimmer and then vanished. He had nothing left but a dying hull and the desperate hands of a girl barely half his height. Another blast hit. The floor jolted. A pipe above them split open, steam hissing into the cockpit. Daniel coughed, vision blurring. He slammed his hand on the engine controls. Nothing. Dead. He thought, this is it. Then suddenly life. The hum returned. Faint. Stuttering but real. One engine coughed awake. The lights flickered back. Systems bled power into the shields again. Daniel blinked in disbelief. She did it. The girl crawled out of the vent, her silver skin smudged with black grease, her breathing sharp and ragged. She had torn strips of cloth from her own suit to bind wires together, blood mixing with oil on her small hands. Daniel caught her as she stumbled. Her weight was feather-light in his arms. You, he began, but her lips moved first. Her words were broken, halting but clear enough. Not safe. Yet. She pointed weakly to the console. Daniel snapped back to the controls. The raiders were circling, preparing for another strike. His hands flew over the panel, using the little power she had given back to him. Engines roared, pushing the ship forward just in time to dodge the next blast. But the raiders didn't give up. They swarmed like wolves, claws of fire reaching for their prey. Hold together, Daniel muttered to the ship, to the girl, to himself. Just a little longer. She pulled herself beside him, even though her body trembled. Her small hand hovered over the console. She didn't know the human symbols, but her eyes scanned the lights with sharp intelligence. She pointed to a failing circuit on the screen. Daniel followed her signal without hesitation, rerouting power. The shields flared brighter dot together. They moved as one, him flying, her guiding. He dodged fire by seconds. She caught every weakness before it collapsed. It was like she could see the ship's heart beating in ways he never could. But with every second, she grew paler. Her breaths grew shorter. She had already given everything she had. Another hit. The cockpit shook violently. Daniel grabbed her before she fell, pressing her against the seat beside him. She looked up at him, her moon-bright eyes half closed, whispering words he barely understood. Help, you, not stop. Daniel felt something heavy in his chest. She was breaking herself apart to save him, a stranger. The scanner beeped. Ahead, a narrow asteroid field stretched like a wall of jagged teeth. Dangerous, suicidal, but also cover. If he could reach it, the raiders might lose them. He pushed the engines hard. The ship screamed. The girl weakly reached out, touching the stabilizer controls. With her last strength, she kept the systems balanced as they plunged into the spinning rocks. Asteroids spun past. Metal scraped their hull. Sparks burst inside. But the raiders pulled back, too afraid to follow. Finally, silence. Daniel slumped forward, sweat dripping from his face. His hands shook on the controls. He turned to the girl. She had collapsed again, her eyes closed, her tiny chest rising and falling slowly. Her hands were burned, raw from the wires. Yet her face carried the faintest trace of a smile, like she knew she had saved them. Daniel stared at her, a storm of emotions tearing inside him. She wasn't just an alien girl. She wasn't just a mechanic. She was something else. Something he didn't understand yet, and for the first time in years, Daniel whispered words he thought he'd never say again. Don't leave me. Please. The ship drifted silently between the asteroids, alive but broken. And so were they too. Lost souls, bound now by more than chance. The asteroid field groaned around them. Massive rocks spun past, scraping against the hull. Every second felt like the ship could be torn apart. Daniel's hand stayed firm on the controls, but his eyes kept flicking to the alien girl beside him. She was slumped against the chair, breathing shallow, her silver skin streaked with grease and burns. Even like this, she looked determined, as if she had not failed him, as if helping him had been worth her pain. He pressed his hand against her shoulder. Stay with me, he whispered, her eyes opened just a little. Twin moons glowing faintly. She looked at him, then at the cracked console sparking nearby. With trembling fingers, she pointed at the failing power coil. You, fix, she breathed out. Daniel froze. She was telling him what to do. Not begging for help, not asking for rescue, telling him how to keep the ship alive. He hesitated only a moment before obeying. He tore open the coil's casing and followed her weak instructions, his large hands clumsy compared to hers. She guided him with faint nods, her eyes barely open, but still sharp. The coil stabilized, humming again. The ship steadied. Daniel exhaled a shaky breath. He looked back at her, and for the first time, he felt something strange. A bond, trust, not built from words, but from survival. From the way she gave him everything she had, even when she was breaking apart. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore, it carried meaning. Why? Daniel asked softly. Why save me? Her lips parted, but the words came out broken. Not let you die. Her voice was soft, cracked, almost too weak to hear. Yet Daniel felt the weight of it. She didn't know him. She had no reason. But still, she had chosen him. Before he could answer, the scanner beeped. Daniel's heart jumped. A raider ship. One had dared to follow them into the asteroid belt. It prowled just behind, waiting for them to slip. Damn it, he muttered. He pulled the controls hard, weaving between spinning rocks. The enemy ship fired, and a blast lit up the darkness. A rock exploded, fragments slamming against the hull. The girl stirred, eyes half closed, but her small hand reached out. She touched Daniel's arm. It was the first real touch between them, her skin cool against his, her hand shaking. He looked at her. She didn't speak, but her eyes told him everything. "Trust me." Daniel swallowed hard and nodded. He shifted the ship's angle, following her gaze as she motioned toward a cluster of massive stones. It looked suicidal. The space was too narrow. His ship could be crushed in seconds, but he trusted her. He pushed the engines. The ship roared through the gap, scraping metal so loud it shook the cockpit. The raider fired again, but the blast missed. The asteroid cluster closed behind them like a wall, sealing the raider outside. Silence fell once more. Daniel leaned back, breathing hard. Sweat dripped down his face. His heart thundered. He turned to the girl, and for the first time since meeting her, he smiled faintly. "You just saved us again," he said. She tilted her head, confused by the words, but she seemed to understand the feeling behind them. Her lips moved in a whisper. "Together." Daniel's chest tightened. That single word, broken and simple, carried more meaning than he expected. Together. He noticed then how small she truly was, barely reaching his chest even when standing. Her frame thin, almost fragile. And yet, she had done what he could not. She had saved his ship twice. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out. Daniel caught her in his arms. Her body was light, far too light, as if she hadn't eaten in days. Her head rested against his chest, and for a brief moment, he felt something. More than survival. He felt protective, but the moment was broken by another alarm. Oxygen levels dropping fast. The ship's systems were alive, but bleeding resources. Daniel tightened his jaw. "I'll fix it," he muttered. But her small hand pressed against his chest, stopping him. She shook her head weakly. Her glowing eyes locked onto his. "No, you fly, I fix." He stared at her. She could barely move, yet she was still willing to crawl back into the wires, burn herself again, just to keep them alive. Daniel shook his head firmly. "Not this time. You've done enough." For a long moment, they stared at each other, human and alien, strangers bound by a ship on the edge of death. And then, slowly, she nodded. For the first time, she let him take the burden. She trusted him back. Daniel turned to the failing systems, his hands steady now. Not because he believed in the ship, but because she believed in him. Outside, the asteroid field shifted, rocks colliding with deep echoes like distant drums. The raiders were still out there, waiting. Danger wasn't over, but inside that broken ship, in the faint glow of dying lights, something new had sparked. Not just survival, not just desperation, the first touch of trust. The ship drifted deeper into the asteroid field, hiding in the shadow of massive stones. The engines were quiet now, powered down to avoid detection. Only emergency lights glowed inside the cockpit, painting everything in red and shadow. Daniel sat in silence, one hand still on the controls, the other resting against the arm of the small alien girl who lay slumped beside him. Her breathing was shallow, her skin pale silver, her small chest rising and falling with effort. She had saved him twice already, and each time she had given more of herself than she could afford. He looked at her burned hands, her fragile arms streaked with cuts. His throat tightened. She was breaking down, yet still whispering words of survival. He heard them in his mind, together. But now, together might not be enough. The oxygen gauge blinked dangerously low. Food storage was gone, destroyed in the ambush. Medical supplies? None. Even if the raiders didn't find them, the ship itself could kill them both. Daniel leaned his head back against the seat. For the first time, the weight of choice pressed down on him. He had one emergency pod left, barely functional, but it could carry one passenger to the edge of the system, where rescue might be possible. One life saved. One life left behind. His eyes shifted to the girl. She was small, frail, her breath shallow, but she had fire in her eyes. Fire that refused to die. Fire that had kept him alive. Daniel clenched his fists. He whispered to himself, "Do I send her away, or do I stay with her until the end?" The silence gave him no answer, then a sound broke it. A faint metallic clatter from deep inside the ship. Daniel froze, listening. It wasn't the raiders, it was inside. Something in the ship's belly had shifted. A reactor coil on the edge of collapse. The girl stirred beside him. Her eyes opened, faint glow returning. She saw the look on his face and understood. Weak as she was, she tried to rise. Her tiny hands pressed against the floor as she whispered, "I fix." Daniel grabbed her shoulders gently, holding her down. "No, not this time." Her eyes widened slightly. She shook her head. "I must. Ship die." "You'll die first," Daniel said firmly. His voice carried a weight he hadn't felt in years. A human soldier's voice. A protector's voice. "You've already given enough." She stared at him, trembling, caught between her instinct to repair and the new, strange trust building between them. Daniel stood, pulling the toolkit from the wall. "You taught me. I can do this, you rest." Her lips parted, as if to argue. But no words came. She looked into his eyes, searching, then slowly nodded. For the first time she let go. She trusted him. Daniel dropped into the narrow maintenance tunnel. The air was hot, smelling of burning wires. Sparks leapt in the darkness. He crawled deeper, his broad shoulders scraping the walls where the alien girl would have slipped easily. His hands worked fast, but clumsy. He remembered her motions, the way she twisted wires, the order she had chosen. His fingers burned as sparks cut across his skin. But he pressed on. A deep groan rattled the ship. If he failed, the reactor would collapse, tearing the ship apart. "Come on," Daniel muttered through clenched teeth. "Hold together." Finally connection. Wires sparked once, then steadied. The reactor coil hummed back to life, stable. Daniel crawled out, smoke clinging to his clothes, arms streaked with burns. He collapsed into the cockpit, coughing, sweat dripping down his face. The girl looked at him, her eyes wide. For a moment, she didn't seem to believe it. Then she smiled, small, weak, but real. "You fix," she whispered. Daniel chuckled. Breathlessly, "You taught me." Her hand lifted weakly, brushing against his chest. It was the smallest touch, but it sent warmth through him. For the first time, she wasn't just the one saving him, he had saved her too. But the moment was short. The scanner beeped again. Movement. Radar signals, faint but closing. They hadn't given up. Daniel looked at the girl. She was too weak to fight again. Her strength was gone. The emergency pod loomed in his mind. He could put her inside, launch her to safety. She would live, but he would remain behind, hunted, likely killed. Or he could keep her here, risk both their lives, but stay together. The choice burned inside him. Alone, he would have chosen survival. Alone, he would have run. But with her, survival meant something different. It wasn't about living another day, it was about not abandoning the one who had chosen him. He placed his hand gently on her head. "I'm not sending you away," he whispered. "Not after everything." Her glowing eyes widened, shimmering. In the dark, she reached for his hand, gripping it weakly. Her voice was faint but sure. "Then, together." Daniel nodded. His decision was made. Whatever came, they would face it side by side. The scanner screamed louder. The raiders were almost upon them. In the dark silence of a broken ship, one man and one small alien girl had chosen each other, and now they would either survive together or die together. The ship floated on silent engines, hidden in the shadow of a massive asteroid. Daniel sat in the dim cockpit, staring at the flickering scanner. Radar signals moved faintly on the edge of range. They hadn't left. They were hunting, waiting for the moment to strike. Beside him, the small alien girl stirred. Her breathing had steadied a little, but her body still looked weak. She lifted her head, her glowing eyes scanning the cockpit like she was calculating every broken piece. Then she looked at Daniel. "You, not safe," she whispered. Daniel gave a dry smile. "Neither are you." For the first time, her lips curved in something, almost like a grin. Small, fragile, but it was there. He pulled a thermal blanket from under the seat and wrapped it around her tiny frame. She accepted it silently, her fingers clutching the edge. For a moment, the silence wasn't just danger, it was almost peaceful. But peace never lasted. The scanner beeped sharply. One raider ship had broken away from the others. It was circling closer, scanning the asteroids. Daniel's gut tightened. "They're sweeping the field. If they find us," the girl shifted suddenly, crawling toward the console. Her fingers tapped weakly on the surface, pointing to a hidden auxiliary channel. "You hide here," she said. Broken but clear. Daniel frowned. He hadn't even noticed that channel. It was buried under layers of code. "How do you know that?" She froze. Her glowing eyes lowered, her small body stiff. Daniel leaned closer. "You've been on a ship like this before, haven't you?" Her hands trembled. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then, softly, she said, "Not ship, prison." Daniel's chest went cold. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. Her voice cracked, but the words came. "Taken, small, too weak. Sold, worked, machines." The image hit him hard. A child, because that's what she had been, no matter her species locked away. Forced to fix ships for masters who only saw her as a tool. Her scars, her skill with wires, her fear of silence, it all made sense now. "They called me useless," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Too small. Not fighter, not mother, only machine girl." Daniel felt something sharp in his chest. Anger, not at her, but at those who had used her, who had hurt her. He reached out, placing his hand gently over hers. She flinched at first, then slowly let him hold her hand. "You're not useless," Daniel said firmly. His voice was low, steady like steel. "You saved me, twice. You're the reason I'm still breathing. Don't ever think you're nothing." Her glowing eyes lifted to his. For the first time, they shimmered not just with light, but with something wet. A tear. But the moment broke as the scanner shrieked. The raider ship was moving closer. Daniel pulled back, his soldier's instincts snapping into place. "They found us." The girl pulled off the blanket, her small frame shaking but determined. "We fight." "You can't," Daniel protested. "You're too weak." She shook her head, crawling toward the weapons console. No systems. Raiders. Same design." "I break them." Daniel stared at her, stunned. She wasn't just a mechanic, she had knowledge of the raiders' own ships. Knowledge born of her captivity. He nodded once. "All right. I fly, you break them." The engines roared to life, drawing the raiders' attention. It lunged toward them, weapons hot. Daniel swerved hard, weaving through spinning rocks. Blasts lit up the dark, shaking the ship. The girl's fingers flew over the console, clumsy but precise. She tapped into hidden frequencies, rerouting signals, forcing glitches. The raider ship jerked mid-flight, its weapons stuttering. "Nice work," Daniel muttered, teeth clenched as he dodged another asteroid. The raider tried to fire again, but its cannons went dark dead. The girl looked up, a flash of pride in her tired eyes. "I shut them," Daniel smirked. "Remind me never to make you angry." But before relief could settle, the scanner lit up with new signals. More raiders. They had traced the battle. A whole pack was closing in. Daniel cursed. Too many. The girl gripped his arm with surprising strength. "No, run," she whispered. "We fight." Daniel looked at her, This small, broken, scarred alien who had been thrown away by her own kind. She was ready to stand against an army, even if it killed her. And in that moment, Daniel made his choice again. He would fight with her, not because he had to, because she deserved someone who wouldn't abandon her. He tightened his grip on the controls, eyes locked on the scanner. Then we fight, together. The raiders closed in, their shadows filling the stars, and in the dark cockpit, two souls prepared for war. The stars outside burned with sudden light as the raider fleet closed. In, 10 ships, fast and hungry, engines glowing red like the eyes of predators. Daniel's battered vessel had no chance in a straight fight, and both he and the alien girl knew it. But retreat was no longer an option. The cockpit shook as the first blasts slammed into the shields. Sparks rained down, the smell of smoke filling the air. Daniel gritted his teeth, gripping the controls. Hold on. Beside him, the girl was strapped to the weapons console, her small hands flying over the controls. Her body trembled from exhaustion, but her mind was sharp, eyes glowing as she scanned enemy signals. They... Faster, she muttered, voice weak but steady, but blind in rocks. Daniel glanced at the asteroid field surrounding them. A deadly place for any pilot, but also cover. A dangerous idea sparked in his mind. You want to play hide and cut? He asked. She gave the faintest smile, her head nodding. Yes, trap them. Daniel pushed the engines hard, diving the ship deep into the spinning rocks. Massive stones spun all around them, close enough to scrape the hull. The raiders followed, firing blindly, but their larger ships struggled in the tight space. The girl tapped into the comm system, sending out fake distress beacons, scattering false echoes through the asteroids. Raider scanners lit up with ghost signals. They chase shadows, she whispered. Daniel smirked. Good, let's give them something real. He swerved hard, guiding the ship into a narrow tunnel between two massive stones. A raider followed too close, not expecting the sharp turn. The alien girl pressed a button and Daniel's ship dumped broken scrap metal from the cargo bay. The raider plowed straight into it. Its engines sparked, its hull cracked, and the asteroid wall finished the job, tearing it apart in a flash of fire. The girl's eyes widened. She looked at Daniel with awe. He glanced at her and grinned. That's one. The other raiders closed in, furious. The ship jolted as blasts slammed against the shields. Warning sirens wailed. Daniel swerved again, weaving through chaos, but the ship was failing. Shields dropped, armor buckled. Another hit, and they'd be torn apart. The girl's hands shook as she typed into the weapon system. Not enough power for guns. Then give me something else, Daniel growled. She closed her eyes, thinking fast. Then her fingers stabbed the console. Engines. Overload, then cut. Daniel's eyes widened. She wanted to turn their engines into a weapon. Dangerous, reckless, but it might work. Do it, he said. She nodded, sweat dripping from her forehead. Her hands moved with speed, rerouting power, forcing the ship's reactor into a surge. Lights flickered, alarms screamed. The whole vessel shook like it would explode. Now, she cried. Daniel spun the ship, engines flaring bright. For a second, the ship lit like a small star, blinding the raiders. Then the girl cut power. Their vessel went dark, drifting like a corpse. The raiders fired blindly, missing by meters. Their sensors scrambled, their aim lost. Daniel's hands were steady on the controls. Hold, hold. The girl whispered, her eyes glowing faintly. Wait, then strike. He waited until the nearest raider flew close, searching. Then she slammed her hand on the console, rerouting just enough power to the forward cannons. Single shot. Pure, focused fire. The raider's hull split in two. The cockpit filled with light as the ship burned. The girl sagged back, panting hard, her body trembling from the effort. Daniel caught her before she fell, holding her against him. For a moment, "You're insane," he muttered with a grin. "But brilliant." Her lips curled in the faintest smile. Together, but they weren't safe yet. More raiders still prowled, their shadows flickering on the scanner. Daniel's ship was nearly dead hull cracked, shields gone, weapons almost empty. "We can't keep this up," Daniel said, jaw tight. "One more pass and we're finished." The girl looked at him, her eyes soft but fierce. She pressed her hand against his chest. "No, we live," she pointed at the largest asteroid nearby. Its surface glowed faintly rich with unstable minerals. If a blast struck it, the whole thing would erupt like a bomb. Daniel understood instantly. "You want me to lead them into it?" She nodded. "Bait. Then fire." Daniel pushed the engines, what little power they had left, dragging the raiders behind him. The enemy swarmed close, eager for the kill. He weaved between rocks, leading them toward the glowing asteroid. The girl's hands shook as she primed the last weapon charge. Her voice was a whisper, but it carried strength. "Now." Daniel jerked the ship upward at the last second, barely skimming the asteroid's edge. The raiders behind him fired too late. Their own blasts slammed into the unstable rock light, consumed the darkness. The asteroid erupted in a storm of fire and steel, swallowing the raiders whole. Silence followed. Daniel's ship drifted out off smoke, battered but alive inside the cockpit. He and the girl sat in silence, breathing hard. Their bodies were broken, their ship nearly destroyed. But they were alive. Daniel looked at her, his voice soft but certain. "You're not my passenger. You're my partner." Her glowing eyes met his. For the first time she smiled without hesitation. Forever. Outside, the stars burned quiet again. But inside the broken little ship, two warriors had forged something greater than survival. Asterisk. The silence after the battle was heavy, almost unreal. The asteroid field floated quiet again, only fragments of burning raider ships drifting like dying stars. Daniel's vessel shuddered, hull scorched, alarms weakly blinking, but it was alive. And so were they. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his chest rising and falling. His hands trembled on the controls, the aftershock of survival running through his veins. He turned his head slowly toward the girl. She sat slumped beside him, her tiny frame wrapped again in the blanket. Her silver skin was bruised, streaked with grease and burns, her hands raw from wires and sparks. Yet her glowing eyes were calm. She wasn't afraid anymore. Daniel's voice was low, rough. "We should be dead." The girl tilted her head, a faint smile touching her lips. "But not." Daniel let out a breath that turned into a laugh. A broken, tired laugh, but real. He hadn't laughed like that in years. For a long moment, neither spoke. The stars outside were endless, and inside the cockpit, the only sound was the faint hum of systems trying to hold together. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "When I found you, I thought you were just another survivor. Someone I'd help, then leave behind." He shook his head. "But you didn't let me. You chose to stay. And you saved me more times than I can count." Her eyes softened. She reached out with one trembling hand and touched his arm. "Not save alone, together." The words struck him harder than any blast. Together. It had been her truth since the moment she crawled into his broken ship. Daniel covered her hand with his larger one. "Then, what do we do now? The ship's dying. The raiders might come back. We don't even know where to go." She looked at him for a long moment, her glowing eyes deep like a quiet ocean. Then she said something that surprised him. "Home." Daniel blinked. "Home where?" She placed her small hand against his chest, right over his heart. "Here." For a moment, Daniel couldn't speak. He had fought wars, lost comrades, drifted through empty space with nothing but silence. He had never been called home by anyone, not for years. Yet here she was, A 4-foot alien girl the galaxy had thrown away, choosing him. His throat tightened. He pulled her gently closer, wrapping the blanket tighter around her. She rested her head against his chest, her body light as a feather. He whispered, almost to himself, "Then I guess I finally have a home too." Her lips curved into a soft smile. Forever. The word hung in the air, simple but unshakable. Forever. Outside, the scanner blinked faintly. No more raiders. Only stars. Daniel shifted in his seat, his soldier's instincts telling him the ship wouldn't last long. But for the first time, he didn't feel panic. He felt peace. They would fix it together, or they would find another ship. Or they would drift until rescue came. Whatever happened, they would face it side by side. He brushed a strand of her silver hair back gently. "You know, when I first saw you, I thought you were just a kid. Too small, too fragile. But you're stronger than anyone I've ever known." Her glowing eyes opened, locking onto his. "And you, first human, who saw me." Daniel's chest tightened again. He had seen her not as a tool, not as a prisoner, not as a mistake. As someone who mattered. A strange warmth spread between them, quiet but undeniable. Not just survival. Not just partnership. Something deeper. He leaned back in his chair, keeping her close. The stars moved slowly past the cockpit glass, endless and silent. For the first time in a long time, Daniel didn't feel lost in that silence, because he wasn't alone anymore.